Okay, what do they say? Last but not least. So it's my honor to introduce our last inductee, Dave Nichols, and he'll be introduced by Dan O'Rourke.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you to the New Hampshire basketball organization, and congratulations to all the inductees. I was thinking about what Brad said about Donnie. It pretty much summarizes Dave. So it must be the Oyster River way of doing things, which is pretty impressive. And a little bit later, I'll talk a little bit about that. I'm Dan O'Rourke. I'm from Hanover High School's coach for the girls for the last 30 years. And it's my honor when Dave called me this summer and asked if I'd introduce him. Dave began coaching in 1970 at Milford as a volunteer coach for 2 years and was part of their state championships. And that, I think, sort of laid the foundation for where he's gone with his career since then. He coached freshman basketball for 2 years at Milford, JV basketball, and baseball at a whole variety of levels. And from there, he moved to Durham and took over coaching the boys. And in his second year, made it to the finals against Timberlane, losing to Bucky Tardif. And that didn't stop him. He continued, much like Donnie's experience against Lebanon in 1988. Dave faced Lang and beat Lebanon for their first championship. He then moved on to the girls in 2002, and that was the same year that I started coaching varsity. I'd been at Hanover for 6 years before that. That year, Ed Tenney at Kearsarge won the championship. And then for the next 6 of the next 7 years, Dave and I battled back and forth. He won 3 championships, we won 3 championships. And it was a really fun time. We had very great legendary coaches within Class I, and we learned a lot. And I think it makes us all better, and it really set the bar. You talk about culture. Dave, as I got to know him, he has very similar approaches to basketball that I have. Dave, the next year, went undefeated. And that was with a great team led by Brittany Cross, whose mom's here today. And much like all of the other speakers have talked about, we're here influencing lives. And to this day, all of the lessons taught continue into adulthood. And I was thinking about, as I was listening to all these speeches, tomorrow's the preseason NHBCO coaches meeting. I noticed, I think at 8 o'clock or whenever there's a mentor session for young or new coaches. I would recommend that all those coaches listen to all these speeches, because all the themes here give you a blueprint about how to be successful both on and off the court and influencing young lives. So in 2005 was the first time that Dave and I actually met in a championship game. We had everybody back, had won the year before, had 2 D1 kids, but Dave, it's hard to read him sometimes. He has a very poker face, and I always knew that his teams always got better year after year and during the season. And so while on paper we're, in my eyes, heavily favored, I knew it wasn't going to be that easy. And sure enough, they hit a 3-pointer to end the third. We foul them, and I'm going to the fourth quarter tied, and it was a battle all the way to the end. We won that year, but then in 2009 we faced each other for the last time. And the backstory here is we again had a loaded team coming back, went into Oyster River early in the season, and absolutely played the game of our lives, won 71-39. If you've ever been to Oyster River or played in Oyster River, it's typically not an easy place to play. What I learned early in my career is you have to learn or meet these refs, officials, and get to really know them. Because I always noticed that Dave would get after them, and it was a tough place to play. But we played great. Keith Friel was doing the book, and he mentioned to me afterwards, you know, you guys are hands down one of the best teams I've ever seen. However, when I went through the line, shook Dave's hand, there was that face, a look of determination. And throughout the rest of the season, I watched on the NHBCO website, and they didn't lose another game. And sure enough, we faced each other in the finals. We again held them to 39 points, which was great, because I think in my career I've only lost 2 or 3 games when I held a team under 40 points. That was always sort of our goal. Unfortunately, Dave's team came in and played one of their best games. It was a defensive battle, and they held us to 33 points, and he won. But there are a lot of lessons there. You know, it's, again, it gets to sort of some of the common themes that people have talked about. Creating that culture, determination, respect of the players, the way they conducted themselves on and off the court were truly a reflection of the way Dave runs his program and ran his program. Fortunate for me, he retired in 2013. Fortunate both because I no longer had to coach against him, but probably more fortunate because I called him up, or he called me. I can't remember how that ended, but long and short of it is I said, "You want to scout?" Because I didn't have to drive the long distances in the Seacoast, and back then a lot of the best teams were in the Seacoast area. Both Ed called him to scout for him at Sunapee, and Dave spent the year scouting. And when I received my first scouting report, I really started to begin to understand who Dave was. It was 8 pages, single spaced. And of course, he sends it at midnight, and I then have to somehow figure out how to decipher this and put in teaching points, and all by the next day. Over the last 12 years, Dave has continued to work more deeply with the Hanover program. He comes to our summer ball several times. He continues to scout. He drives up and down 89, 2 hours each way. Usually comes the day or two before a big game. We go over the scouting report. He does it. And he's attended and sat on our bench as an assistant coach every one of those games. And again, it really tells a lot about him as a person, his dedication. I think all the wives of coaches in the room, listening to a lot of what everybody said, you gain a real appreciation for what they put up with and the support and loyalty they've given to all of us who have basketball as our passion. And so I would just say that Dave has found success wherever he's coached, and most importantly, he's done it the right way. He's a man of integrity, high moral character. He's done it with commitment, respect, and he's created the culture. And I think someone said that earlier. It's really about creating a culture, and as Donnie just said, making kids feel like this is something special, and I want to be a part of this. And that, and all the characteristics that you teach along the way, Dave has done and is continued to be in contact with several of his former players and has influenced their lives. So it's my honor to welcome into the Hall of Fame Dave Nichols.
I want to thank of course, as everybody has done, thank Dave Chase and all of the NHBCO crew. I was on their board for a number of years. I was kind of the Class I Division II director for girls basketball and representative for girls basketball, and collecting all those all-state ballots and all that stuff. And at one point, the rest of the guys on the board started to talk about maybe doing a Hall of Fame. And I don't know if I volunteered or if someone volunteered me for it, but I put together a rationale, a plan for how we might do that at some point, and then presented it at the clinic. People heard it at the clinic. That was a good idea, but it really didn't go anywhere for a few years. So when I got the call this summer from Dave, I was shocked that, oh, we actually do have a Hall of Fame. I didn't know about the first class, but I'm glad to see that all came together, and it's great. like Dawn said, I have no idea who nominated me, but I have an idea of it, but I want to thank them, whoever that was. I'm going to try to speak in my coaching voice. Sometimes I do that around the house too and get told by my wife to quiet it down. Thank you, Dan, for all of those kind words. I'm going to do this a little bit differently perhaps than some of the others. I began coaching at 19 years old as a Little League coach. When my older brother asked if I would help him out. I have those words in quotes in my notes here. I have to admit I kind of took over, since I had a lot more free time as a college student then than he had as a young family guy running his own business. I loved it and have coached ever since. Falling for coaching gave me some direction and motivation to go back to college and get my degree and pursue that. 84 teams I've coached over 54 years. 84 teams. That means a lot of those years I was coaching 2 or 3 teams at a time. And that doesn't count summer league, fall league, camp teams, all-star teams, stuff like that. That's real teams. You know, from all the way from Little League right up through high school, a lot of AAU and stuff like that. I'm also as I said before, about a 6-decade coach. My wife looked at me and I looked at her and says, yeah, I am too, actually, 6-decade coach. I think I'm the only one in the group that's still coaching. I don't know if that's legal or not, but I have a great time helping out Dan. Let's see, over those 84 teams over 54 years, 44 of those were basketball, where I was at some level, I was the head coach. You know, the head coach of a Little League team, the head coach of the freshman team, or whatever. You know, it was your team. But many other times, including the last 12 years, where I've been an assistant, a volunteer assistant or a paid assistant. I've coached baseball, softball, soccer, golf, as well as basketball, mostly basketball. I was also an athletic director for 15 years, president of the Athletic Directors Association at one point, and chair of the NHI classification committee for several years. When I married my wife, Deb, who was here to support me, I told her I would probably coach for a while. I was 22. I think she thought I was just talking about that Little League team. But she stuck with me through all of these last 51 years and been a great supporter. That's a lot of nights for her home alone. So thanks, Deb, for all your patience and support, and also for mostly not making coaching suggestions. Love you, Deb. There was one suggestion she made to me, though, that really paid off. She said to me at one point, back in the early 80s, I have this friend over at work that I just met who's got a boyfriend that they're going to marry soon, but she's got a boyfriend who is interested in coaching. He's doing a little bit of coaching over in Somersworth, but it's just at the like elementary level or whatever. He'd really love to get involved with a varsity program. Hey, send him over. That's how Don Maynard and I connected. And thanks, Deb. Thanks, Cheryl, for connecting the two of us, because it was has been great for a long time, and we've been good friends and great respect for each other through all those years. I've also coached with or against many of the Hall of Fame members. In fact, I think I have a connection in some way to all of them, and actually didn't know about a couple of them until tonight. When I was at Little League coach, and then coached a junior high team, and eventually a couple of varsity teams, I found some material on John Bogonzi and his pitching. And that's one thing, I was never a pitcher, and I read a lot of that and learned an awful lot about pitching. So great to meet you, and
Thank you.
Look back on that little bit of a connection there. But a greater connection with a lot of the others. Don mentioned Lang Metcalf. Yes, I had some great games against Lang Metcalf. In my second year as a coach, I had a guy over here, Matt Whaley, on my team, and a guy named Pat Galvin, and we had a great team. And we played against Bucky Tardif 3 times in that year, but to get to the finals, we had to face Lebanon and Lang Metcalf in the semis, and we won. And it was interesting, Matt shared some things with me earlier today, some of the articles. And, there was a coach that wrote an article who was giving me advice on how to coach against Lang, and it basically was, hold the ball, because they were so good. Well, we didn't believe in that kind of basketball, and we didn't do it. And we did end up beating them by a couple of points and got to face Bucky's Timberlane team in the finals. Unfortunately, we lost to Bucky by 30 points the first time we played them, and played them a month later, and we lost by 13. Dan mentioned that teams got better during the year, and we faced them again in the finals. We lost in overtime. We had a shot at the buzzer that hit the rim. The shot was from half court, but I always joke with that kid, that shot had gone in, Chris. And we lost in overtime, but had that connection. And then 7 years later, met Lang again, this time in the finals in '88. He had an undefeated team. We had a great season coaching a really good Goffstown team, really good, that we beat in the quarterfinals, I think. We beat Merrimack Valley, had a guy named Scott Drapo playing for them. We beat them in the semis and got to play Lang's undefeated team in the finals, and we won that night for my team's first championship. Jack Ford and Mike Lee. I got so many stories I could tell you about them, but Mike has begged me not to mention them. But we coached AAU together for a while, and one particular season where we took a club down to Arkansas for a national tournament. We had some great times doing that. I coached, Jack being a legend on the Seacoast, I coached, a lot of scrimmages against him, went to a lot of Mike's Christmas tournaments, and had a great time with both of those gentlemen. Dan Parr. Dan Parr was let go at Portsmouth at one point, as I was a few times as well, but at one point in the 80s, and I read in the paper that he said he was still hoping to coach again. This was way back in the 80s. I gave him a call. Said, if he really meant that, and nothing else came up, we had an opening for a JV coach if he wanted to keep coaching, and he did. He came over and was our JV coach for 1 year. He told me a few years after that, when it came up, he said, that may have been the most fun I ever had coaching. There was no pressure, no trouble from parents, no pressure to win. He said, it was just great to coach my team and have fun during practice and then sit and watch you struggle games. Gary Janess and Buddy Trask, knew them mostly as athletic directors and committee members that and did a lot of things together, and I always had great respect for what, how they were real champions for the basketball being played up in the North Country. They did a great job for a number of years. John Fagula, I coached against him at AAU a few times, and when he moved over to Londonderry, we scrimmaged them each year, and I'll tell you, I learned an awful lot just talking X's and O's with John over the years. Coach Gio Art, coached against him a little bit when he had a short time at Conval and got to know him a little bit and always respected what he did. Ed Clough, Ed's forgotten it, but I did coach a little bit against him, but I was the JV coach at Milford when we played against him, and Mo Fox was the head coach, and you remember Mo, I'm sure, and then a little bit when I was varsity coach at Oyster River. And then Ed Beatty, didn't really play against. We met a few times in summer leagues and things like that, and I coached some of his players in AAU and always had tremendous respect. While I was having good years, Ed was having unbelievable, fantastic runs of 5 years in a row. I thought it was good to win 3 championships in 7 years, and he was winning 5 in a row. And then finally, that guy over there, Don Maynard. Second former assistant coach of mine to be also in the Hall of Fame. Don started as my volunteer assistant and all of that. And one year, he got to coach my son, and shortly after that, I got to coach his daughter. So that was enjoyable as well. I have no idea how many, we were asked about this, what's your one-loss record over years? thinking, are you kidding me? 84 teams? You think I have any idea what a win-loss record was? Well, I know as a varsity coach, I had around 325 varsity wins. That's just as a head coach. I have no idea how many losses, far too many. 6 finals, however, 4 championships, and both runner-up teams were good enough to win state championships, but unfortunately the other team that night was just a little bit better. I do have a question for everybody. In 1998, Bucky Tardif told me that if his Timberlane girls team won the championship that year, that he had been told by somebody that he'd be the first one to ever have both a boys championship and a girls championship. As it went on, his team didn't win. I think they get knocked out in the semifinals, probably by you. But back when we won championship in 2003, Bucky sent me some email or whatever, says, congratulations, you're the first. I hoped it would be me, but it's you. I don't know if that's true or not. Maybe somebody else knows of somebody, especially back up there in the North Country, maybe somebody else has done it. I don't know. As I told Ed one time, when Ed didn't quite make it, we were hoping Ed would follow. This team just barely fell short. And I said, oh, geez, I was really hoping. We had these club meetings and they're getting really lonely. Danny Park came close a couple of times as well. Let me see, I taught high school math for 35 years, everything up through pre-calculus. Even while I was AD, then 5 more years I taught as a long-term sub after I retired in 2014. Lots of students, lots of athletes, lots of both. A lot of times, like the Maynard kids, a lot of the others, both in class and would see them in practice. I even have a couple of kids from that first Little League team when I was 19 years old that I'm still in touch with now, and both have sent me congratulations about this season. One of them was in Florida, so he wasn't able to make it up here, but that's pretty neat for me. Notes here. 3 of my basketball players are here today, and it's nice that you put this picture up. This is great. This young lady right here is sitting right over there, Jillian Friel. Yeah, thanks for putting her picture up there so you don't have to look at me this whole time. Right up there beside me is my lovely daughter Kate, and she coached. That poor kid. She had to play for me for 6 years in AAU, 3 years in high school. And then as if that wasn't enough, after college, she came back and coached with me for 4 more years as a JV coach. Wow. She's now down in North Carolina, and we'll probably at some point see this on when it gets on the website. So, love you, Kate. Let me see. Got all that done. As I said, there were 3 of my players here today. Jillian, who's one. Riley Maynard, another one. And then gentleman right over here, Matt Whaley, played on my first team, my first varsity team at Oyster River, and played with only for a couple of years, and we stayed in touch. Part of the reason we stayed in touch is his older brother, sitting beside him, is the best sports writer in New Hampshire, hey, Mike Whaley. Yes. Thank you, Mike. Okay. So I coached future doctors, dentists, nurses, lawyers, teachers, coaches, college administrators, business owners, financiers, I wrote, and actually even Brad and Don, a slight correction here. I coached Scott Poteet before he did, but that was on the golf team. So it was great to see Scott go off into space, and what a great kid he was. Unfortunately, a little downer here. A few of those people are no longer with us. If you coach basketball, girls basketball for very long, you're eventually going to lose a few players, as I have, to breast cancer, and I know I've had 2 of those. So my heart goes out to them and their families, and hope it won't be many more. Lots of my players went on to college careers, and I was even able to, I have attended a couple of their college Hall of Fame inductions of former players, so that's been fun. After the 1988 Boys Championship, I was retired. So I said that. I was retired as the administration decided that I should focus on the athletic director's position, which I had also been doing for a while. I had a lot of problems with parents the last couple of seasons, as they thought their kids should be winning championships every year and collecting college scholarships. I even overheard one dad telling another that if Nichols knew what he was doing, Dean Smith, yeah, that guy from North Carolina, the coach of Michael Jordan, Dean Smith would be in this gym tonight watching my son play. Yeah, sure. Well, his son didn't want to help us win a state championship. He had a nice career at St. Anselm's, but North Carolina, not quite. So I was retired, but I kept coaching in AAU and with my kids' rec teams. I coached 6 years in girls softball. Dawn complains about 3. I had to go for 6 years. Coached a lot of rec teams and things like that. We won my AAU team. Girls AAU team won 5 state titles in 6 years and went to 5 national tournaments. We did it twice with boys. Let me see. One of those, after my daughter's freshman year in high school, the varsity coach and the JV coach both left. They both had other things they wanted to do, and they also could see that the cupboard was pretty bare for the next few years. So we had this search. I was the athletic director, had this search. We came down to one finalist. He came in and spoke with the principal, assistant principal, and myself. And after he left, the principal shook his head, and I said, boy, he lied a lot that he didn't in my first interview. Like, for instance, telling us that he could get all the way from Wilton to Durham for practice in 45 minutes. I'm thinking, well, maybe in the middle of the night if you're driving 100 miles an hour, but no. And also about some AAU championships his team had won. Well, I followed that up because I knew some AAU people and found out he coached our third team. They didn't win any championships. So the administration said, no, let's keep looking. And after the assistant principal took over the search for a little while, then they both walked into my office and said, Dave, how about you coaching? And I'm thinking, yeah, 7 or 8 years ago you had to retire me, but now you want me to come back and coach the girls. What's that say about how you value the girls? Oh, whatever. Okay, knowing my daughter was going to be on the team, I said, okay, I'll do it. We had a couple of rough seasons trying to rebuild the program, but by the 3rd year, we were doing okay. We had, in my daughter's senior year, I was fortunate all of my years I had really good big kids, good post players. We were kind of known for that, both in my boys' teams and the girls' teams I coached. Good post players, and we had some good ones. Not always great guards. But anyways, we had a fairly decent team by Kate's 3rd year, and now I'm going to tell you a quick little story about a game. Kind of 2 games. We were playing Somersworth, and that was a local rival, and they were in first place that year at the time that we played them mid-season. They came into our gym, and we could tell that they were a far better team. They had at least one kid that went on and played in Division I basketball. After 3 quarters, they were up by almost 30 points, so it was time to concede, and I put my bench in, and the other coach, she put her bench in. About halfway through the 4th quarter, suddenly I see her best player going back into the game. This is a girl that a year later would have a Division I scholarship. What are you putting her in? You're up over 30 points ahead. Why is she in the game? And I thought, well, maybe she's going to distribute it so some of these kids that don't play very often will get a chance to score. No. In the next 4 minutes, she scored 12 points, and they ended up beating us by 43 points. After the game, to the line, and I guess I had my stoic face on, and I just got to the end, and I just held the coach's hand, and I said, what in the world were you doing putting Melissa back in the game for the last 4 minutes? And her answer was, oh, she was singing on the bench and carrying on, and we just couldn't stand her anymore, so I had to get her off the bench. So you reward her by putting her back into the game. Okay. Well, we went into the locker room, we talked about the game, and I kind of mentioned that to the team. They all knew, Somersworth and Oyster and Durham are not too far apart. So those kids had played against each other since, their rec days. And so they knew. My kids kind of filed that away. We played them again in their gym 3 weeks later. I remember we lost by 43. We went to their gym. We had 2 games left in the season. One was against Somersworth and one was going to be against Hanover. They were getting their best player back from a big injury, so I knew we weren't going to beat Hanover. I also knew that we were probably in the tournament, but definitely would make the tournament with one more win. Oh, what's it going to be? Well, we went out that night in Somersworth, and we beat them by 8 points. And I went in the locker room and just mentioned to the kids, yeah, that's a great game, fantastic performance. I said, that's a 51-point swing from our earlier game. We definitely are getting better, and we're getting ready for the tournament. And then I added, and Melissa's not singing tonight. Well, my team started singing. They sang in the locker room. You go down a long hallway, they sang all the way down the long hallway onto the bus and kept singing all the way home on that bus ride. It was the only time I ever took a bus ride that I wished it would have been twice as long, because they were so excited about that game. So that's the one game I wanted to tell you about. Well, after that season, I had a new principal, and I was retired again. And he told that, well, you've got some assistant coaches that are probably capable of taking over. Why don't you get back and focus more on your AD duties? There were never any complaints about those. I think Don could back that up. But I think the reality of it was the assistant principals and principal were getting tired of having to cover the boys' games and the hockey games when my team was on the road. So, okay. I thought about it and said, well, my daughter's going to North Carolina. She went to Guilford College, and she was going to play down there. If I'm not coaching, maybe I'll get a chance to get out and see a few games. And it worked out that way. For a couple of years, I did that. And then some other things had happened internally, and I decided I've had enough of being an athletic director. I'm going to go back and teach full-time. I was still teaching 2 or 3 classes of math while I was doing all the other. I'm going to go back, be a full-time math teacher again, and be able to go to more Kate's games. And my son was coming up to high school at that point too, and be able to see his games. Well, my daughter had her 3rd shoulder surgery. Her career was over. There was no more basketball for her, but Zach was coming up, so I was going to see him. And then suddenly there was a JV girls opening, and the varsity coach had been my assistant coach. She asked me if we can't find anybody else, Dave, how would you like to help me out and coach the JV team for a year? Talked to my wife. My wife said, well, you won't be able to see many of Zach's games. I talked to Zach, and he said, geez, yeah, Dad, they're really going to be good. You probably ought to do that. Well, would you mind if I miss some of your games? He said, no, that'd be all right. You wouldn't be able to correct me for all my mistakes. So I took it. And we did that for a year, and then the varsity coach got retired, and they asked me to step up and take the varsity job again. So I did in 2003 and took it on that team. Somewhere in here. Boy, I'm going to get them all mixed up. But what happened in that year? Something turned into a magic season. Sorry. Got something specific here. Okay. 2003 was extra special. I'm not going to take you through every game, no worry. I knew I had inherited a really promising group. I was very impressed with how coachable these kids were, how much they loved to play, and spend time with each other. I told them they had an opportunity to play 25 games together. So there's 18 regular season games, you've got 3 Christmas tournament games, and then if you make it all the way to the finals, you can play up to 4 more games. They said that's 25 chances to play together. Well, we went out and won that night. Our opening game won quite easily, and after the game I said, 1 down. And they shouted, 24 to go. Well, we kept that up. through the year after every game. We went to the Queen City girls basketball tournament at Central undefeated. Beat 3 Class L teams, including Nashua, who went on to win the Class L championship. And headed back to our regular season, 8 down and 17 to go. We then completed the rest of the season, still undefeated, and entered the Class I tournament with the #1 seed. 21 down and 4 to go. We survived Conval, Kearsarge, Lebanon, and met preseason favorite John Stark in the finals. Well, after that game, it was 25 down and 0 to go, which is followed by cheers and tears. We'd gone 25-0 and won the first girls basketball championship at Oyster River in 25 years. I knew Dan was going to talk about the 2009 season, so I decided to highlight the 2003 season, but there was one in between. 2006, we also went undefeated. Jill was a freshman on that team, and one thing that I really had going for me through all those girls, we had great captains, and I hope I was a little part of that and helping get them go, but they were all great captains. And Brittany Cross was the first one, along with Lindsay Lawton, and then Megan Wyand and Kate Maurer, and then Sam Brown, and then eventually it came down to Jill Friel and Danielle Walczak, and just great leadership from great captains. So I thank all of them. Over a 7-year period, we won 3 titles, and in those 3 years, we lost only 1 game. And that was the game Dan talked about. I coached another 4 years at Oyster River before another principal came along and suggested I retire again. Don was certainly right about all the experts in the stands and all the former coaches and parents that, they knew what should be going on. Why couldn't the coach see what should go on? So we went through that together, and overall I had 7,000-point scores at Oyster River. Had others that played AAU and certainly others at Hanover. But I really saw myself as a defensive coach. I emphasize strong defense, and that's how you get better as the season goes along. Your defense gets better and better and better. And I also, we also had great free throw shooters, something I emphasized and we worked on an awful lot. As soon as I got that call that I was retired again, I got that call from Dan to see if I might want to do a little bit of scouting, and that was followed up by Ed, the same thing. Hey, Dave, guess what? I'm getting back into coaching. I'm going to coach my boys team. Would you do a little scouting for me? Well, that's interesting. I'm going to be going to girls Division II games and then boys Division IV games and back and forth. It worked out great. Getting ahead of my notes a little bit here. I'm near the end though. Ed Tenney, former rival at Kearsarge, took over his son's team at Sunapee, and I did some scouting for them. So for Dan and Ed, both great gentlemen that are here with me today, and I thank them for that. I hope that I soon can see them receive this same great honor. They certainly deserve it, both of them. It's also nice that 2 of my closest friends are a doctor and a judge. I'm covered in two important directions there. Another person who should be inducted is my former coach and mentor at Milford, Mo Fox. He won 2 state championships himself in '72, which was Class L. They had just gone up to Class L and they won the state championship, and then 3 years later in '75, I was around for both of them, and he was my mentor. He had been my high school coach. But the biggest thing for his going in is that his former players have gone on to win 11 state championships, including his son and myself and a couple of other people. So you can mentor people into doing that kind of thing. You belong in this. There's some others. Certainly Dave Smith at Co Brown comes to mind, and Jeff Holmes at Exeter, and I'm sure there's plenty others, and we certainly have to get some women in this group too. So I'm glad that we're all going to be part of continuing this. Before I sit, which will be soon, I have 2 more people I want to mention. As I told you, I coached my daughter Kate over 6 years of AAU and 3 years of high school. where she went on to play in college and came back and helped me out. We didn't always see eye to eye, as you can imagine, but it was great to have all that time together. She's in North Carolina today, and we'll see this on tape, so love you, Kate. My greatest regret in coaching was not games lost. It wasn't, challenge that we failed at or anything like that. My greatest regret was not getting to coach my son Zach in high school and middle school. Now I am starting to get teary. He played both baseball and basketball and was pretty good at both. I was able to see a lot of his games, but I missed the chance to be his coach. Don was his basketball coach, and he did a fine job, no issues there. But when I started coaching so many years ago, I also wanted to coach my own kids someday. I'm jealous that Don got to do that, and I didn't. Zach didn't miss much, though. He enjoyed sports, has been a great success in college, earned a law degree, now works at Princeton, so I'm certainly proud of what he has done. Still, I know we both wish that I had been able to be his coach at some point during his career. My loss. Love you. Thank you all again for this great honor.